Things just got way crazier surrounding the Pete Alonso situation as it pertains to the Toronto Blue Jays, as multiple new reports have just dropped, revealing some shocking details when it comes to Scott Boras, his negotiation tactics, as well as a report from Ben Nicholson-Smith revealing some information that has Jays fans and fans of the MLB in general up in arms. We're going to break all it down in this episode, but before we get into it, folks, if you're part of the 71% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable. Thank you guys for your continued support as we are approaching 16,000 subscribers. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over today. Now, obviously, we had a video earlier today covering some trade talks surrounding Michael King and what that means going forward. But right now, so a bunch of Pete Alonso news has dropped this afternoon, whether it's from Jon Heyman, Ben Nicholson-Smith, all these different guys, Andy Martino. And the situation just got a whole lot more, I'm going to say, obviously crazier, but confusing as well. And there's a lot to go over here, and there's some context that needs to be brought up with it. But we're going to start with this report from Ben Nicholson-Smith that dropped just a little bit ago. And it says, a source said that MLB agents have recently been informed that they cannot contact Pete Alonso. They would have to be initiated by Alonso himself. Evidently, Alonso wants to continue working with Boras without hearing from other agents looking to poach him. Now, I'm going to be transparent. No one really knows what this directly means as it pertains to him signing. I mean, We've heard that Pete Alonso is a bit of a strange guy when it comes to his negotiation tactics and all these different things, but it seems now that no one is able to directly contact Pete Alonso, and I don't know, it's a very interesting thing. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on this, but it just makes the situation even weirder. So clearly, Scott Boras, I mean, there's been a lot of discourse about Scott Boras, about what this means, you know, as it pertains to him getting a contract, if he's screwing over Pete Alonso or not here. But again, it has to be initiated by Alonso himself. Other MLB agents cannot contact Pete Alonso, so he still wants to work with Scott Boras. So I guess you can put a halt to the conversation of, okay, Pete Alonso's upset with Scott Boras. He doesn't want to do that. So that was an interesting report. But there were some other ones as well. You think about Steve Phillips. He came out today and said Alonso is an important guy for Toronto. It changes the look for them. Of course, we're aware of this. But there is a lot of things to go over. And let's start with this from Andy Martino. The Mets on Wednesday, which was today, agreed to a contract with Ryan Stanek on a one-year deal worth about $5 million. They've been talking about more expensive relievers such as Kenley Jansen too. The deal with Stanek could keep a bit of wiggle room to spend on Alonso. The Staggo signing more likely than not signals that the Mets are now happy with their bullpen. The only reason we're having this conversation 2 weeks after the pivot is that Alonso has not yet found a home with another team. Talks were advancing last week between Alonso and Toronto, league sources said, but a stumbling block there is the deferred money. So we now got a full report actually revealing some information about what happened last week with all the different rumblings about Pete Alonso being a Toronto Blue Jay. And ultimately, it seems like some reporters are saying they were close to a deal, some weren't. Jon Heyman came out and said that he wasn't really hearing that they were close to a deal. He, of course, is a Scott Boras guy, Scott Boras mouthpiece to a degree. But I mean, he at least has a lot of conversation and contact with Boras. But Andy Martino here is saying things were close, things were advancing, but the Jays offered deferred money like they did with Santander, which Pete Alonso didn't want. So if that is the case, it's a little bit frustrating in the sense that the Jays should be looking at this point and at this juncture to be doing anything they can to acquire Pete Alonso. And even if that takes not deferring money, I think you still try to get that deal done. That being said, I'm also not entirely sold on the fact that Pete Alonso is going to get a better offer by the New York Mets. And I think at this point, it's at a bit of a stalemate in the sense of, okay, it's clear here that now reports are leaning towards the Mets making a bigger offer towards Pete Alonso. That's why they signed a cheaper reliever in Ryan Stanek rather than Kenley Jansen or some of the other guys. And also the fact that Toronto was close to Pete Alonso, but the deferred money was the big holding point here. It becomes very interesting now. And there's just a lot of things going on. And this was also a report from Andy Martino. Spoke about this last night. Signing of Stanek would mean progressing with Alonso. Moving away from Alonso would have signed someone like Kenley Jansen. Andy Martino said yes, potentially. And Andy Martino was the guy who said that the Blue Jays were on the 10-yard line to acquire Pete Alonso last week. He has since deleted all of his tweets besides his new ones now, and he's backtracking, covering his tracks a lot when it comes to what he was saying surrounding Pete Alonso. So as it pertains to the Toronto Blue Jays, it's not great. I mean, it seems like the consensus is things are starting to lean towards the Pete Alonso direction to the Mets. Things are going back that way. That being said, we're just a few days removed from Steve Cohen coming out and saying that they don't even know if they're going to be able to get a deal with the Mets or if they want to even have contact with the Mets. So as you start to look at it now, there's just so many conflicting reports in this scenario. And then you have this coming out from Ben Nicholson-Smith, which is such a weird tweet, I will say. It's an interesting report. I think the best way to interpret it is that other MLB agents aren't being able to contact Pete Alonso himself, as other agents are looking to poach Pete Alonso in a time where they haven't gotten a deal done as spring training approaches, which could also be a bit of a, negotiating block in these contracts. It just seems like the whole Pete Alonso situation is getting weird. It's getting strange, and it's uncomfortable for all sides. And again, this report here from Andy Martino, he's basically backtracking his report last week that he said the Mets were not going to be able to get Pete Alonso. Now he's saying since they signed Ryan Stanek, there's a good chance that they can use that money that they saved by signing Ryan Stanek instead of Kenley Jansen and flipping it and spending it more on Pete Alonso. And again, the Jays were very close to a deal supposedly, but the deferred money is the holdup. And from the Jays side, I would say just offer him non-deferred money. You saved a ton of money on the Anthony Santander deal. It ended up being whatever it was, 5 years, $68 million or something less than that after the deferred money, which, I mean, 5 years, $68 million, whatever it is. Use the money you saved on Anthony Santander and go ahead and spend that on Pete Alonso, because in return, you'll also get a guy like Max Scherzer, in theory, who would want to join the Jays as well here. And the Doug Doucette, January 23rd, again, last week I covered it when he said the deal was basically done between Scherzer and Alonso. He backtracked a bit today, saying pretty clear at this point what I interpreted as a done deal or close to done deals were just offers. Apologies to anyone I got excited. I got myself excited. Still confident it gets done. Go ahead and light me up in the mentions for the rest of the time if you must. I got big shoulders. Basically refuting the fact that, what he said was wrong. He's saying he still thinks it gets done, but they were essentially offers. And I don't think he's wrong about that. 3 years, $75 million makes sense for Pete Alonso. And again, according to this, if you use the reports and kind of put two and two together here, it seems like that they were deferred money. And ultimately, the deferred money is not something that Pete Alonso is willing to take. And again, Pete Alonso is an interesting guy. How he negotiates with his agent, like how him and agent talk. Clearly, Pete Alonso wants to be a New York Met, but the Jays have the better offer, or the Mets haven't really had an offer. At this point, it's very clear Alonso isn't just leveraging the Blue Jays against the Mets. He really doesn't want to come to Canada. Ross needs to let it go. Just walk. I mean, you've given a fair warning, a couple days, but it's over for me. Time to move on. And I'm curious to see, let us know down below, are you done, or let me know down below, sorry, are you done with the Pete Alonso fiasco? Do you think it's getting a little bit too out of hand now if he doesn't want to come to Toronto? I still think he's a very important piece if they can get it done. You have New York Mets reporters now backtracking. You have John Heyman coming out as well and basically saying the Jays are still definitely not out of the mix of Pete Alonso, but it seems like the Mets are more likely now than ever to get him back. And John Heyman also said he never really heard that the Jays were super close or that they were progressing in an Alonso deal, even though some reporters are saying that. And again, at the time when we heard the Jays were progressing on Pete Alonso, Ben Nicholson-Smith and Shai Davidi both came out and refuted that. And we thought that was just Ross Atkins trying to keep things tight. Maybe ultimately it was the case and they weren't as close as some, reporters thought, and ultimately led the fans on again. But I think there's still a good chance it gets done with the Toronto Blue Jays. It might take a little bit of time. It's going to be interesting. We're going to keep you up to date with all the latest news. Tons and tons of reports are coming out. So if you want to be kept up to date, make sure to hit that subscribe button. This is the place to be for daily Jays content. We're going to keep you up to date, or I'm going to keep you up to date in all the latest news. So make sure to smash that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you later. And one more final thing. Let me know down below, what's the max contract you would give Pete Alonso? Cheers.